All right, everybody. Welcome to the Middle Ground, Mike. We got Alan. How do you say your last name, Alan? Hallis. Okay. I like Hallis. Hallis Hall.
Yeah.
Now, a question. Are you related to the Hallis family?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I am not. I'm from Milwaukee, which I've always my running joke is that I got to find a kid in Chicago named Lombardi to hang out with because we would kind of have that kind of back and forth. But yeah, no, I've never tried to pull it, but someday I'll try to maybe go down to Chicago and say, I got to call my great uncle or great grandpa. The family name, right?
Right. Something that, when we were kind of talking over message, one of the big things I liked about your thing is like the independent music, right? And I had kind of told you, like, no, I mean, I always listen to a lot of artists, right? Here, there, but what really kind of started turning me on to watching more independent style music is, Tom McDonald, right? I mean, I know he's
Mm,
like kind of like the cliche of independent music these days, but he figured out how to take on the big record labels and win.
yep.
That's
Yeah.
hard to
And
do.
yeah, there's tons of artists like that. I grew up skateboarding. So listening to a lot of punk rock and a lot of hip hop and things like that from that. But a
Yeah.
lot of bands that just had to make their own way and, would put out their records on their own labels or create a label because they needed something to look official.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
It was wild. He did a video, I think, with Prager University, kind of as like a 10-15 minute video talking about his background. And before, I think his song Dear Rappers, where he had his first big, kind of launched him, he was living
Mhm.
in a house in Compton. They had roaches in the
Yeah.
cabinets. And I was like, man, if that's not like a textbook story, musician that makes it to the top almost,
Hmm.
but, it's ironic he's Canadian.
Well, yeah, but like legitimately rags to riches kind of thing, right? Like that is sometimes that motivates you though. That is the thing to fire you up, especially when like you think like the music industry, there are so many, people that have connections and people that are so and so's kid. But sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need the I have no anything, so we're just gonna go for it kind of mentality.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's not easy for anybody. I mean, I can only imagine.
Mm.
I mean, to be fair, I have had next to zero experience in the music industry. I had kind of some exposure because I have a lot of friends. Like my son, I think he's 15, is at 8 or 9 different instruments.
Yeah.
I mean, he's only like super proficient about 4, maybe 5, but he's got Asperger's. So
Okay.
he just picks up and he starts writing music and just starts teaching himself. And next thing you know, you hear him 3 days later starting to record. And then 5 days later, he just picks it up like that. And that's about my exposure in that. I mean, I had a friend who owned a bar that had bands in there and stuff all the time. And that stuff was cool. So
Mhm.
just give everybody a little bit of a background of kind of like, how what you do and how kind of all that works.
Yeah, so I'm based in Milwaukee, like I said, and I'm a music writer, which means I cover different aspects of the music industry, whether that's going to concerts and writing reviews, interviewing artists, writing about new music. Since 2014, I've operated my own music website called Breaking and Entering. It's breakingandentering.net, and it basically grew out of having a podcast in like 2009 with a friend, and we didn't think we were going to be good enough for student radio, so we started a podcast then. Had we had known, we would have, kept it going for forever. We would have been maybe in a little bit of a different position now with the way that podcasts are. But essentially in 2014, I was fresh out of college. It was the blog era of discovering music. That's how you found music online. So I had the website and I was like, well, I'm going to write about the Milwaukee artists that I care about and want to, expose people to new artists. And so I did the digging online and found a lot of artists to cover. That eventually kind of taught me, even though I went to school for like media and communications, that definitely taught me the ins and outs of running a website as a media outlet and doing all the things that I ended up, now do. Um, Learned it the hard way coming up through that. And then in 2020, basically, I my main job was working at a bank. I was in their marketing department. And in 2020, I made the leap to pursue music media full time. And so got a job at a magazine for the last 3 years. And then now at my current job at On Milwaukee, which is the largest digital outlet in our market.
Wow,
for the
nice.
last 2 years. So, but that all just stemmed from one thing, domino effect on top of the other, on top of the other. That's the short version of it. I learned a ton of things along the way, whether it's promoting shows or how to book bands, how to make money off of promoting shows, and how to make money off of a website, digital commerce, all of that. Kind of learned from just doing and doing and doing.
All right. So something that, that I guess where I find a lot of newer music that I've never heard before is YouTube.
Mm.
That's kind of like dominates a lot of things these days. I mean, YouTube's like your cable network now.
Yeah.
How does YouTube play into a factor? Because, I've seen some people say, hey, man, it kind of was my launching platform. Then I've heard some people
Hmm.
say, I got big, but YouTube felt flat.
Yeah.
So, like, from your experiences, what's that like?
I think social just in general is the big middle ground that, not to, no pun intended,
No,
but
hey, no.
it's definitely the equalizer, right? Like you used to need, basically you needed a label for the marketing money. Even when, music went online and you could make a song at home and record it and put it out on the internet. Like the main advantage of a label then became marketing, right? And so now, with YouTube, if you document your journey along the way and you post enough stuff that people like along the way, eventually now it's going to find your people. And especially with social in general, like you'll find your audience that way. So that's something that's kind of the music industry is kind of navigating, is like, how do we take the system that has been in place for decades and some kid comes up out of nowhere and doesn't need us anymore?
Right.
So it's a lot of trial and error. And I mean, it's a small percentage that actually do become beneficial, make their name off of YouTube, but it happens for sure. Same as it happens with TikTok, same as it happens with Instagram. Eventually, people just find their audience that way. So,
Yeah,
for
no.
me in general, I would say though, in the case of the Milwaukee music scene, there is an entire section of the hip hop scene that totally just lives on YouTube. That they pay videographers, and these guys make like movie quality music videos, like really really good looking stuff. And their YouTube channels have thousands and thousands of followers, so they know that if I get posted on this guy's channel, then people are going to find out what I do music wise. But that's their whole strategy, is to just put out music videos. So it's wild. It's its own separate little world.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, that's just, when I look at YouTube, it's crazy. You'll find like a music video on YouTube, then the very next thing's a short about something that has nothing to do with music, even though you searched music,
Mhm.
so like the algorithm, for, any independent artist that may be out there seeing this, like, what is like something, because you got a lot of experience in different avenues. Like, what's something they can do to kind of just give themselves like a leg up?
I think one thing that, and actually I tell a lot of independent artists, is one thing to do is to carry yourself like a major label artist, even if you don't know what you're doing. So essentially that means like, if you can Google it, for sure learn how to create like an electronic press kit for yourself, learn how to write press releases and how to craft them the right way. Don't just use Chat GPT. Like figure out what you see from major label artists and just observe. And the more that you observe and learn is definitely like the leg up strategy for them, because honestly, like if you can get out to the media, you have an advantage. If you can consistently put out a product that people want to read about, write about, like you have a story to tell, that's all the more power to you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can imagine, especially if you ain't got that record label money, that can be definitely a little challenging.
Yeah, well, that I mean, like that too. Like a label would provide a PR person normally, right? And there's
Right.
certainly people that do it freelance, but they cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So if
Yeah.
you can figure out how to do some of that and communicate to the media what you're doing, what you're putting out, without having to pay that expense along the way, like that is so much in your pocket saved that will help you in the long run for sure.
Oh yeah, I've for like podcasting, I've learned to utilize AI for editing. Still got
Hmm.
to go back and do some myself, but I use, obviously I use Riverside as a host,
Hmm.
and their AI will go through and it will get rid of like 70% of what I would have had to spend tons of time doing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, this thing's like a godsend. I'm like, I think I just, yesterday was like the 50th, or today or yesterday was the 50th episode published.
Hmm.
And, and that's in like 3 months.
Right.
Guys kind of hit the ground running, man. And I'm just like, hey, you know what? It's something I'd like to do. And, you know, and it's just like, seeing like the transition of everything and how that works. Like I've taught myself pretty much everything A to Z.
Yeah.
Look at what other people do, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, okay, so that's, I can kind of relate to that aspect, like, look at what the other people do, see what they do that works, figure it out for yourself and apply it.
Well, yeah, totally. And there are so many different applications for that now, obviously. We're just on the advent of learning about all of it, right? As we're all are doing. But like in the podcast space, like there's going to be a day where you'll be able to put out, dozens of clips from every episode just seamlessly, right? For an artist, they're going to learn how to write press releases for themselves and get their music out to the media. But they're also going to be able to figure out how to market, 12 different songs online at one time at the same time and just scale up what they do. Like that's coming. The labels will probably figure it out first, but there will be savvy people that will figure out how to break through that way too.
Yeah. And, it's only beneficial because instead of that money going to the hands of a few, it's being spread out amongst a lot of people who can use it
Mhm.
and live a better life rather than all the money being concentrated. Because, I've heard tons of stories about, I think TLC was the name of the band. I watched a documentary on them and
Yep.
they were like, yeah, we're broke. They're like, yeah, the
Yeah.
record, they've only made all this money, but we only made $1 million. And they're
Yep.
like, and after you subtract ABC, we made next to nothing.
Yeah, that's the behind the music with them, where they break down
Yeah,
exactly how much gets taken out. Like your manager takes 15% to 20% at the time. The label took so much, marketing took so much. In many cases, honestly, record labels operate like taking out a business loan. They'll front you in advance for let's say $100,000, but they're gonna make that $100,000 back with interest.
oh yeah, tenfold. And then when I had read that, I was just like, oh man, I was like, that's just wild that you make all like the record that, I think you would think that it would be something kind of like how sports works, where there's like a revenue sharing percentage. I don't know if it works that way now, but I know that seems to be like the common way that athletes and artists seem to be getting more money is through like the sharing of like, hey, revenue percentage of this music or,
Yeah,
royalties, I think is big in the music industry.
yeah, I mean, I can tell you, like Spotify pays 0.0003 cents per stream. So it's something like you need either, I think, 3 streams to make a penny or 30 streams to make a penny or something like that. Whatever, the math is on that. But still, fractions of a cent every time you play a song. So if you think about it now, if you have, a song that does 100,000 streams, that doesn't pay much for you at this point, right? And it costs money to put your songs online through a distributor. You're $20 in the hole just by putting one song out. So, or
That's
50,
just,
depending on what the distribution is. So, in order to make that back just on pure streaming alone, like you have to have a popular, successful record.
yeah, that's, man. So that, I mean, putting it like that from your end, that's even crazier how, some of these other guys have done it. But I'm sure you've heard of Adam Calhoun. Grew up in the streets of Chicago, and he's, I mean, he's not as big as Tom, but he's in that stratosphere, you
Mhm.
know, and I mean, he's just a straight shooter. I mean, I agree with the guy on some of these things he says, yes or no, but but I like the fact that he pretty much just like, hey, this is me, this is what I'm doing, and he's made it work, and he's made a good life for himself.
Yeah, and there's a lot of artists that, aren't the most rich artists in the world. They've figured it out though, how to make money other ways, whether that's touring, whether that's having loyal fans that will, support what they do. And sometimes like, I mean, bands will put things out and they'll tell fans pay whatever you want. And that's great if somebody pays, a dollar for your record, but then you'll get people that will pay $20 for your record just because they like what you do. They want you to keep doing it. So there are certainly ways to go about it, but purely on streaming is unfortunately not the way. And also, I should note, like I was talking about, like how little Spotify pays and things like that, and how little all the streaming services pay. That's only if you have your business affairs set up the right way too. Like if you know like you are set up through a distributor to receive money and that you have your payment signed up. A lot of the artists that I've seen that I've worked with maybe don't have their paperwork in order on the back end too, and they don't have the administration side. I have a friend that runs a music administration business that's all they do is they figure out the paperwork for you, and you would be surprised at the number of independent artists that don't even know how to get paid off of their music, right? So they're making nothing and expecting nothing in return. They're just hoping that something's going to blow up for them and they'll figure it out later.
Man, that feels like a losing battle.
Yeah, it
Yeah, yeah.
definitely is.
I mean, if I'm doing work and there's money floating around, yeah, I want my cut
Right.
because
Totally. Well, I mean, I'll give you even the example of like, so we book shows. I will put on shows, and especially right now in the hip hop space in some venues, because just of the nature of the promoters, like there are times that I've paid artists out at the end of the night and they've gone, wait, I was getting paid for this? They had no idea. Like they legitimately did not know that they were going to be paid for their performance, right? Bands, not so much. Sometimes, I mean, you have enough veteran musicians that get it figured out. But sometimes artists don't even know that they're going to get paid at the end of the night for doing their work, right? Doing the thing that they want to get paid for. It's pretty eye opening, and it tells you just that like the number of sketchy people that are also out there that are probably taking all that ticket money and not paying their artists, right? So at least I can pride myself on being like, yeah, no, no, we are going to pay you for that, right? So
yeah, I mean that's a great thing. I mean, I know as if I was doing something at a show and I seen people collecting money, I'd be
mhm.
like, hey, am I getting some of that? Like
Yeah,
they're kind of here to
totally.
see me.
Yeah. Well, I had an artist one time ask me, actually within the past year, they asked how much it was because we do one big event every year that is like an 8 weeks leading up to the big festival here in Milwaukee. It's a Summerfest. We do a beat battle. That's the 8 weeks leading up to it, and it's like our premier event. And an artist asked me this year, how much does it cost to perform at that? They were going to pay money to me to perform at this show, and I was like, no, 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 no. This is the exact opposite. We take sponsor money so that we can pay our artists, so we can pay our DJ, so we can pay our hosts, like to pay out, the people that need to get covered. But yeah, just one of those moments where you're like, oh my goodness, how do you operate this way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering. I mean, truly, how do you pay your bills? Buy food at the grocery store, because Lord knows that is not getting any cheaper anytime soon.
Yeah, totally.
That's just wow. I mean, man, that is eye opening. I would have never guessed that. Just hopefully, the artists out there listening to this, hey, man, you should be getting paid, or at least
Yeah.
explore your avenue of trying to get paid. That is just that's wow. That's all I have to say. That is just wow. I could not imagine working for free.
Yeah.
In that type of
And
situation.
right. And it was a free show that they were getting paid. Like it was free for people to come in. They weren't getting ticket money at the door for that one. But still there were sponsors, and sponsors are what, pay for that sort of thing. And they just weren't aware of that at all. Like didn't even phase them on it. I will say I've been in and around independent music for now over 15 years. I've seen the full gamut of things, from people paying to play for situations or people trying to get people to pay to play situations to people not knowing that they're getting paid. I've had artists ask me how much it cost me to rent the room that they're performing at, and that's not the case. That's not how we do things. So it's shocking the amount of the like sliding scale, I guess, of education regarding like getting paid for your music.
Yeah, I mean, is there any avenue out there for them to be like, okay, hey, this is where because how some people kind of just like they'll put it out there and explain it, if you want to call it, for people like like
Yeah, I think
YouTube
mainly, I
sites.
mean, Googling it is, Googling how do artists get paid would probably be so beneficial. And I think it's something that they don't necessarily do. I'll give a shout out to my friend that runs the music administration business. Her name's Aishal White. She runs a company called Moo Sample that takes care of the music administration side of things. She's really good at educating. She's got content online where she'll teach people how to make sure that their papers are signed the right way. But I mean, just really observing like how do people sign deals? How do people, what does a booking agent do? What does a PR person do for you? Like if you're an independent act, like those are things that you need to learn. But so many are just focused on like, I want to make a great song and I'll figure it out once the song hits, which is
Yeah,
wild.
I'm not gonna lie, I would have never guessed that.
Mhm.
Just to be like, I would have been like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just flabbergasted about the not even know if you're getting paid. I mean, even if you're not, and it's a pro bono thing, right? You should still ask the question, how does the money work?
Right.
Even
Yeah. You
like
would
it
think.
should just be because if you're not getting paid, you got expenses coming.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
And, artists will go on tour and lose money, and like, they'll play for, or they'll make enough money on one city to get them gas to get to the next city to play the next show. But then when you look at, the costs involved with just being able to travel and sustain on top of that, like, is it worth your time then? So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing to navigate, and hopefully there will be some avenues in place in the future where people will be able to make more money, digitally or off of touring or whatever, that will change that kind of landscape for them.
Awesome, man. I mean, so tell me how you kind of got the name for your company, Breaking and Entering. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah. So it started really as a joke. We were trying to figure out what we were going to name this podcast back in 2009. And so I was going into college at Marquette University. So was my co-host at the time. And we went to high school together in Milwaukee, and we had some friends that were going to be staying on campus at Marquette. So we had joked that we were going to do the podcast out of their dorm room, and they were not having it. Obviously, they don't want to have us just crash and do it, right? And
Right.
do a podcast in there every week. So one of our friends said, "You got to call it Breaking and Entering, because that's the only way that we would let you into our dorm to go and do that." And lo and behold, we had no other name, so we called it Breaking and Entering. So it was a student radio show. It was a podcast back in the day on a little website called mypodcast.com that probably doesn't exist anymore. And then it was a student radio show at Marquette for like a few semesters. And then my co-host at the time was a psychology major, so he got very busy with school, and I was a communications major, so this was kind of the thing I was doing. So that's when we split off, and I was like, well, I still have the website, so I'm going to make a go of it.
And you said Marquette. Is that Marquette, Michigan?
No, Marquette University in Milwaukee.
Oh, okay, okay. Because Michigan in the Upper Peninsula has a city named
Yep.
Marquette.
Yeah.
So I like, oh man, I mean that's just it's
Yeah, no.
that
We got the Golden Eagles down here.
I'm in the suburbs of Detroit.
Okay.
Most people here are all U of M. U of
Okay.
M, go blue, and I'm over here. I'm like, go Sparty, Michigan State, and people are like, what? I mean, that's
Yeah.
like fighting words, and I'm like, go green, man, and they're kind of, it's like I'm definitely in a crowd. I'm one of 100.
Right. And we're predominantly a basketball school too. We have no football team. So I mean, unless you're watching March Madness, or I mean, if you watch us throughout the year, but basketball is definitely, basketball season, something special here.
Yeah, MSU, I believe they're big with basketball and football.
Hmm.
Their football program kind of goes like this crazy arch that could be really good, and then it just becomes terrible all of a sudden, and then they'll have like there's no consistency in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
But that's just it's crazy that you're like essentially like right across the pond per se, if you want to call it that. I mean, obviously I'm on the other side of Michigan.
Right.
You know, uh, I'm sure you've heard Detroit's called like Detroit Rock City.
Yep.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's like rock is still pretty big here. They just closed down a venue. I believe it was called Harpo's.
Okay.
It was big here for a long time, and recently it just closed. I don't know why. No, I mean a lot of speculation, but I never
Yeah.
seen myself anything direct about it. And that was kind of like where they a lot of mosh pits, heavy metal.
Hmm.
I'd been to Harpo's, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 times.
Okay.
I wish that I would have been able to Ramstein. I mean, they're not small, but when they came to Chicago, I think it was last year, or the year before, man, I was really bummed I wasn't able to go because
Yeah.
I've seen their music videos online, man. I'm like, of their live concerts, I'm like, I have no idea how you guys make money, but because that
Well,
stuff has got to be expensive.
I mean, the production part of it is expensive, but that's where they're playing stadiums, and that's a whole different
Yeah,
stratosphere of, what things are. I do a lot of like the festivals. I go down to Lollapalooza every year in Chicago,
nice.
and we do Summerfest here in Milwaukee. Like, that's 3 weekends of just concerts, basically. But yeah, the amount of like production that goes into something like a Lollapalooza is unbelievable. But when you have 100,000 people there every day, and that'll pay for some things.
Yeah, you got a couple bucks to make it happen. You don't got to worry too much.
Right?
Um,
Exactly.
from your perspective, who's throughout some up and coming artists that you think, hey man, people should check this so and so out.
For sure. I mean, the Milwaukee music scene has a ton of talent just in every little sector of it. It's one of those things where, like, so our website has been around a little bit over 10 years. Breaking and Entering's been around just, we're in our 11th year of operation right now. And I've watched the music scene grow and the level of talent just get bigger and bigger. And there's been 2 or 3 times where people have been like, this is going to be the year that we break out and we do something big. But every little pocket of the Milwaukee music scene has some talent. So like on the rock side, there are bands like Diet Light and Social Sig and Bug Moment and Scam Likely that are, they're all rock bands that just kind of grew out of this little like bubble of like the east side of Milwaukee. They probably all went to UWM, University of Wisconsin Milwaukee here, and played basements and played house shows for a long time. And then that just gradually became like, after COVID, really being like, we're going to play your venues and we're going to play the biggest venues we can play. Like locally, they were selling out a 750 person venue called Turner Hall here in Milwaukee, in downtown Milwaukee. On the rap side, we have so many, like, there are 2 different hip hop scenes in Milwaukee, basically. There's that YouTube scene that I kind of talked about. But then there's the more like artsy guys that are more stylish when they rap. There's guys like Von Alexander. There's an artist named Mo City that is just super talented and has kind of like a little bit of like southern drawl in his raps that like
Okay.
make you feel like, it kind of reminds me of like Andre 3000 from Outkast.
Yeah, I haven't heard that name in a hot minute.
Yeah, and then I mean, there's people like Emmett James and Genesis Renji that are just purely about like creating the art of a really talented hip hop, and something that you want to listen to, like no matter what your situation is. If you're just hanging out at home, if you want to go party, like whatever, like they have music for it, and they've been making that music for a long time. So that's why we kind of cover what we cover. Is there's just a huge level of talent here in the city that's kind of undiscovered.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of bands, really. I mean, when you kind of think about it, from just like a little section of a city, to have that many bands, feel like, hey man, these guys could actually, do something. And
Yeah.
selling out like small venues. I think we have a venue like the here. I think might hold a little bit more. It's called the Fillmore.
Okay.
I think it might be a little bit bigger than that. Don't quote me. Like a lot of
Hmm.
your bands from the '90s that would sell at stadiums that half of the band members no longer there have passed away.
Right.
They sell those venues out. I went and seen Stone Temple Pilots.
Okay.
God, I don't know. Back in the day, it was before Sky had rejoined the band.
Sure.
I it was great. It was a great time and everything, but it just wasn't the same without Scott. I mean, it was just the vibe was different.
Yeah.
I had seen them when they were on tour, back when I was younger. So I was like, it was good music. Not knocking it. I
Yeah.
mean, it sounded great, but it just that flow.
Yeah.
Certain artists with their their voice have a certain flow.
Yeah. And there are certain like frontmen like that, I mean, their persona is the band, right?
Yeah,
Without him, in that sense, that band really doesn't have an identity. So, they have the songs, but it's not the same if the guy singing it, if the person singing it is
yeah.
different,
Soundgarden, same
is
thing.
drastically different.
Right. Oh
Unless
yeah,
you're,
no. What is it? Soundgarden, I feel like is the same way when it comes to that. I was really big on them back in the day. Like, I don't think
mm,
you could really have Limp Bizkit without Fred Durst.
but yeah, no, totally not. It would be a completely different sounding band. So there are
Yeah,
very few that are able to actually really replace a frontman and do it well. I honestly think Linkin Park did an amazing job picking Emily Armstrong as the new front person for that band, because it was such a choice that seemed like left out of left field, but like that energy is there, and like that is what you want to look for most in your lead singer, right? Somebody that encompasses it and does it. If you're going to replace that person, something that they're going to do it differently, but it still has the spirit of what that original singer did, and it's hard to replicate, it's hard to find.
yeah, no, yeah, it's. I think what another band I can think of is AC/DC, Van
Hmm.
Halen.
Yep. Yeah,
I know
ACDC for sure.
uh,
Being able to replace Bon Scott, how do you do that? you know
they figured it out somehow. I mean,
yeah.
they got lucky. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it also is they just have a good sound to them, and
Hmm.
that's what I seen AC/DC in concert when they first did their one of the big reunion shows in America, and it was crazy. And then I was actually at Guns N' Roses first reunion show,
Oh, okay.
when Axl Rose first rejoined the band, they had everybody there. That was it was definitely different. It was good, but different.
Right.
It definitely felt like and it was at Ford Field in Detroit. The place was sold out, just because of the nostalgia factor, right?
Mhm.
Certain bands are going to just sell. I mean, they could have at that point you could have the worst sounding music in the world, but everybody's going to remember 20 years ago and know that they're going to pay to have that feeling again.
Yeah, absolutely. That chemistry is what they pay for, though,
Yeah,
right? Like that feeling of having, it feels like the same band that you remember. It drastically isn't. Like there was an era of Guns N' Roses where like Buckethead was the guitar player, and they would not be selling, stadiums if Buckethead was still the guitar player.
right. Yeah, I mean, another person I think of that is like irreplaceable. Well, technically two people on this band. Metallica, one of the more controversial bands. Good, but
Yeah.
controversial. Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield, or Hetfield, I'm
Mhm.
sorry. You take, they've swapped out a couple people, after what's his name died. No, I'm
After
drawing a
Cliff
blank.
Burton died,
Yeah,
yeah, they
Cliff
had
Burton,
a few different bassists, and
Jason
like,
Newsted, and then
yeah,
forget
Robert
the guy.
Trujillo from the
Yep.
Suicidal Tendencies was there. Yeah, but you got to find like somebody that nails it, somebody that's that right person, and that is so hard to do.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, especially, if you're on that kind of scale, I mean,
Mhm.
you mess that up, you're done.
Yeah, it's a huge gamble,
Yeah,
huge gamble.
yeah, I can even imagine that that's probably more like if you're on like on a smaller level, that can matter because it can definitely mess up the flow. I would imagine because to
Yeah,
me, flow and how you feel when that song plays is everything.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And like that's where you have to, really kind of rehearse that a lot with somebody, or really get a feel like audition heavy for that position. Especially in like, the more of the stuff that I do where it's independent acts and they're younger, like your whole sound could change if one person is different because their gear is different, and that just naturally creates a different tone. And like that energy, you want to have that camaraderie with that same person too, and that's not easy to do.
No, no, it's not at all. I mean, being on the same page with someone and just clicking is no matter your industry, but especially
Hmm.
when you're trying to collaborate and create a vibe with someone to, create music, I can imagine it's probably like right up there, if not above, like I would say sports. Because
Yeah, I was just
sports you
thinking
can
that
learn
too.
to work with someone, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
with music, you gotta like it's gotta just be that
Mhm.
connection. It's just gotta be like they gotta know if you're thinking A, they're automatically gonna think B for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and if when it works, it works, and when it doesn't, it's very clear that it doesn't. And sports is like a really good analogy for it. Like, I mean, so this is a very immediate thought, but like we're in Milwaukee, the Bucks. We just got rid of Damian Lillard because he's injured for the next year. And now you have to figure out, is the new guy coming in going to play off of Giannis the way that he would have, right? So, I mean, like it is chemistry, it is, camaraderie with those people too. Like, is this somebody that's going to be a locker room guy in music? Is this the person that you want to be on in a van with, going state to state, trying to
Oh yeah.
get along with for weeks at a time? Like, it all does
Yeah,
play
yeah.
a factor.
Here in Detroit, we had Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson slash Megatron.
Yeah.
That connection there. I mean, Stafford, he's put Cooper Cup on the map back over there in LA. He's done a lot of things, but just the energy that those two had in their younger years. I mean, Stafford could literally just run around the field for a second and then alley oop it up, and Calvin would just be like, whoop, got, he would. I was at a Bengals game. He had
Mhm.
three defenders draping him, and he just
Yeah.
reached up over them and caught a touchdown like it was nothing.
Yeah. And as somebody that had Calvin Johnson on his fantasy team for many years, I was very, very proud I was very much a fan of them having that chemistry for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Yeah.
definitely a bummer when he asked to be traded. I don't blame him.
Mhm.
To say I'm a little salty about it to a degree. Yeah, yeah. I have several of his jerseys,
Yeah.
in case signed. He's a diehard Stafford fan. Would a radio show host here would call? He'd be like, "You're a line slappy. Stafford can do no wrong." And I'm like, "Well, the Lions really never put a complete team around the guy.
Right.
If one thing was good, the other thing was bad, But I mean, now the
Yeah.
Lions got Dan Campbell, and that man can seem to turn dirt into gold somehow.
Yes, he very much has.
I mean, he's so intense with like leadership and kind of like even relates to like music. A lot of band. He's big on Metallica, right? And so
Hmm.
when Metallica came to Detroit, I believe they were here in November. They had actually put out like a video saying, "Hey Dan, we want you to come to the concert and da da da." And he responded, going, "Man, we're going to be on a road game that day."
Right,
He was
man.
definitely not happy. He was like,
Yeah, I'm
you
sure he
know,
found one. I'm sure he found a tour date to get to.
yeah, yeah. He's, I just thought it was like real cool. It's like this guy's energy, especially like I've heard him talk in person, and it just goes back to like anything, whether it's music, sports. He just like, he is so passionate about what he does.
Hmm.
Like tears come out of his eyes when he's trying to prove a point. And
Yeah,
it's like, when people see that, they automatically they're drawn to it, right? Because they go, this guy's want to put it all on the line to make it happen.
right.
And I can imagine in your industry, that's just as
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, like, if it's something that you care about, you will make the sacrifice for it. I'm a big believer in that,
yes.
especially like, when it's the end of the night and you've put on a show. And in my case, like, we totally have had concerts where, maybe 10 people show up, maybe sometimes less than 10 people show up, and you're sitting in your driveway at the end of the night and you put all the stuff away and, you're done. And you're like, why did I waste my night on doing that? When you thought it was going to be successful kind of thing. And like, that's just what happens sometimes, but you go and you do it again because you like doing it, right? Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't keep making that sacrifice. You wouldn't keep banging your head against the wall trying to make people show up to events, if you didn't love it.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, passion's everything. I mean, you can see, obviously you would know more in detail, but like like guys like Tom McDonald, right? They have just like a crazy passion, not just for the music, but for the message that they put out, right? Like
Yeah.
he's really big on hit. Like where he, I think, above everything is his message, and
Yeah.
people resonate. A lot of people resonate with that. A lot of people find him controversial and can't stand the guy. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I feel like a lot more people like him than don't.
Right. Oh yeah, and having that conviction and having that belief and like having an authenticity about it too is important, right? Like if it's you can tell, I think most times, like when somebody is in my case, let's say an artist is just trying to make music because they just want to make money at it. And you can tell when there are tons of musicians that they don't care if they get paid, but like they would like to, but they would still be making the same kind of music or they would still be pouring their heart into their music no matter what because they like it. And that's ultimately the people that get a fan base are the people that connect with seeing like an authentic person doing their thing.
Yeah, I mean, all the like you're saying, authenticity. It's everything, man. Because people can read through something like that. Like that's kind of like what kind of got me to really start doing this, right? The podcasting, and
Mm.
I've been somebody who like, in my management career, I work in called mid-level management.
Hmm.
I'm always big about, hey, we gotta, especially when you're dealing with a lot of people, right? You always gotta find that kind of like that, especially when you got two people that work together all day long. There's gonna be conflict there, man. It just naturally happens.
Yeah.
So, it's just learning to find that balance. And, and I feel like just in general these days, I want to say like younger generation because that makes me sound like I'm 90. But, some of the younger kids, and I don't know if you experience this, sometimes they don't, I don't know if it's not school or if at home, it doesn't really teach them to collaborate with the people around them as much anymore.
Yeah. I think part of that too is just the nature of where we've been in the last few years, right? Like everybody was isolated for, 2 years almost. So they learned how to do a lot of things on their own. And people are just in general a little bit more independent now, I think, than they used to be,
Yeah.
either by necessity or just by preference kind of thing. So yeah, I could see where, a younger generation would say, well, I'll figure it out. Like I'll do it myself and they're going to be more independent just naturally because they also have a little device in their pocket that can teach them just about anything they want to learn too, and they know that, which is different.
Yeah. The only message I would have for younger people, and it's something that, COVID kind of made me a little bit of a homebody. I
Mm.
used to be the type to be like, hey man, I'll get off work even, at 30 something years old, I'll be like, all right, tell my wife, all right, let's go do da da da. And then COVID. Now I'm like, man, you want me to go to the store? You want me
Right.
to go be out in public? Like what? Like,
Yeah.
and I used to be an insanely big, I don't want to call it social butterfly, but I used to just, my son would joke and he would say, I hate going to the store with you, Dad, because every time we do, you find there's somebody that knows you and we end
Yeah.
up there for a half hour longer. And I'm
Right.
like, hey, and then my wife just said, she's like, why don't you just try podcasting? Talking to people, something you're just kind of natural at. And in my
Sure.
job in management, if you don't know how to talk to people, you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you will
Yeah.
fall flat on your face. I've
Oh, yeah.
had managers that I've worked with where I'm like, how'd you even get to this position? Because
Mhm.
you shouldn't be anywhere near leading anybody. I mean, there are some people out there that are just they seem like the politest human being on the planet, but then they're the most vile, mean person. Like 3 seconds later, and I'm like, okay, like moving on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, collaboration, like for me, it's just I think like younger people got to realize like that sometime that, especially when you're doing something like I would guess, in my opinion, like music, right? Like that face to face interaction, kind of that instant, like that you catch that look, you catch that vibe. That's just something that you can't get anywhere else to me, but face to face.
Very true. That also has the part where like some artists think that they're a star when they're not, right? Like when they're coming up, they become hard to deal with because they think that they're supposed to be act a certain way as an artist. They think they're entitled to things or they just don't know any better. So like that happens too. And my kind of job on the back end involves a lot of, coordinating and talking and meeting people where they're at and kind of trying to read their levels on things, right? Like if you're an artist that you think that you're a star and you should be headlining a show and you should be getting all these opportunities, but I see that you're really not there yet. Like, how do I meet you there and say, well, okay, let's have you do this and, get to the level that I want you to kind of be at for your show. And eventually we'll get you to headline, right? Or something like that.
So
It's,
would you
it's a
say like,
difficult thing to navigate.
yeah, would you say people just being bullheaded sometimes or stubborn is the biggest obstacle?
Yeah. Sometimes just people just be not being real with themselves about things too. Like, everybody can see maybe your last song got 200 plays on it. If you think you're a star and you say, oh, I'm the most slept on artist, blah blah blah, but you can't figure out how to get more than 200 people to listen to your song, then I can't give you what the person that has 20,000 people listening to their songs has, right? Like you got to figure out how do you get from point A to point B. And yeah, I think that level of like stubbornness plays a factor and just a competitiveness in general, especially in my case, in a lot of like hip hop things, it's a competitive genre by nature. Everybody wants to be a rapper, right? Like everybody wants to be a star rapper, not even just like a medium, moderately successful one. So how do you tell somebody that maybe doesn't know yet that they're not at that level, how do you bring them down gently, right? Like so it's about how you communicate, how you interact with those people, and ultimately like how you get them to trust you that eventually you will get them to that point, but it's going to take a minute.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a fair thing. I mean, I guess I've watched obviously tons of movies. We all have, right? So they kind of that stereotype sometimes of the snooty artist, musician, I should say. That's like a real thing. Like sometimes I always kind of felt like, all right, they're probably just hyperboling it.
I mean, it is and it isn't, right? Like there are definitely some that are totally fit that stereotype and think that they are something bigger than what they are on their way up. But there's a majority of like, I've dealt with a lot of bands that are great, really awesome to work with. I've dealt with a lot of artists that are really humble and really easy to work with and know, hey, whatever you've got for me is an opportunity, so I'll take it, right? So like, I mean, the best is when you walk into a show and like, let's say I've got 4 bands on the bill and you walk into the venue and they're already set up, they're not running late. They're on time. They've got their stuff together. They're already practicing. The bands are communicating between each other, like who's gonna share things like for the night. Like it's a thing that, if you've got 4 drum sets, who wants to actually like bring one drum set and we'll all just use it tonight so it makes the show go easier. Like I have a lot of bands that I've worked with that are just really, really great to work with like that. And they understand the situation, they know the room, and they're like, all right, we'll do what you treat us nice, we'll treat you nice, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to do it, just in general.
I would say the majority are more like that, and more willing to communicate and work with each other and get opportunities. But those few that don't, when you're dealing with.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I get that way. Sometimes in my industry, I'll get somebody who goes, well, if I'm not here, this place is gonna fall apart. And I'm like, well, I know you
It
think
hasn't.
that, you
Yeah,
know, it wasn't falling apart before you got here, and it'll probably still be standing because as long as there's money to be made, that building will be standing.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
way of any business.
Yeah,
And that's
very
just,
much so.
and sometimes you can tell people that it's like, man, it's like a dose of reality. You don't want to be that way, right? But some people just they don't get it. And you
Right.
gotta just kind of go, hey man, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Like you said,
totally.
being real. You got to be real with yourself. Self criticism and being able to reevaluate. And when you look at something like something that I've always tried to tell people, when my boss calls me and asks me questions about a result, I start thinking about it. And then even if I technically hit a target, I start thinking about it, and I'm like, he's asking me this question for a reason. And the
Right.
one thing that I dislike about, if you want to call it superiors, whatever, there's always like a hidden meaning behind questions. And it's like, man, just ask it, dude. Like, you don't
Yeah.
got to beat around the bush. Just be like direct and, let's hit this nail head on.
Yeah. And I operate the same way a lot of times too, very much with what I do, just in general, whether it's like covering stories or interacting with people. Like, I mean, I manage writing, not only writing my stuff, but we have people that freelance for us. And how do I, meet them where they're at and see what they've got going on in their life? But I think being direct, yeah, just like you said, it's the
Yeah.
easiest way to do business, honestly.
Yeah. And people respect it more, and they'll be more than willing to do business with you in the future if they know you're upfront with them. If people think you're shady, even if you get big, you're going to lose out on some money because some people just aren't going to trust you.
Yep.
you know and
Very
trust is
much.
everything. In business, trust is everything. Not only just making the money, but people got to be able to trust. If people look at you and they can't trust you, it's going to be a bad day for everybody. And there just wouldn't be anything to go around. And
For sure.
man, you know so just from kind of like your perspective, let's say somebody's just kind of like playing in your mom's basement in the garage type of thing, right? What can they
Mhm.
do to kind of get their foot onto a scene like yours, where it is kind of like independent, but they don't know that next step, right? And they're just
Right.
afraid to approach it.
Yeah. I think one, they shouldn't be afraid. You have to take a leap at some point and you have to, make that effort. But two, when you do that, you have to really feel confident in yourself and what you're doing to do it the right way. So, like, if you're an artist and you've got some music coming out that you really believe in, you should be able to put in all the time and the effort around it and not just the piece of music, but like everything that goes with it. Like I said, having that like EPK and having like, the marketing plan for it to how are you going to let people know that this record's coming out? Like, you should have all that stuff ready before anything hits the world, reaches out to the world on the internet, and just have that conviction and really believe in yourself because you have to. Because if you're not confident in those things, people will see that right away and they'll latch onto that.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like you got to be confident in what you do. But
Mhm.
like I would imagine also be willing to hear, hey man, this part of this, it kind of
Yeah.
sucks.
And don't be afraid to ask, right? Like,
Yeah.
we literally live in a world where there's just information available to you, and something, if you take anything from, the amount of research that you do on something, like, you're getting something out of it. If you ask a Google or a Chat GPT or a whatever, like, how do I, reach the media, let's say, it'll give you a result, but then if you take that and act on it, like, you've got something.
Yeah, obviously, I'm digital, right? Because of the things that I'm doing. So, but when I was coming up through the system that I work in, they had these manuals that was probably about 18, 19 modules that you had to
Mhm.
fill out. But what it did different than digital is kind of like what you were saying is ask. So there was no like Google didn't have the answer. I had to like go out. I had to like, start opening up manuals, just doing all this stuff, right? And by doing that, by asking that, you get that you learn more than just
Yeah.
something kind of automating it to a degree, right? And I think that can help make your product better, no
Yeah.
matter the industry. And I can imagine, especially in yours, because I think
Yeah.
music to me, music more than anything, the product is
Mhm.
like I don't want to say like epic, right? But it's big.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, just the amount of advances, right? Like you said, let's say back in the day, I brought home a new mixing board and I need to learn how to record my band. And it on page 73, it told me what I needed to do in the manual, right? And then it changed to like, oh, if I went online and I searched it, it would teach me how to possibly, do that thing that I needed to help record my band and make them sound better. Now it's to the point where that's even too much to go in and search it and have to do the research. Now it's just like, tell me the answer of how to do this, and it's there. So like just the speed, the like ease of it all is like going to make huge strides for people recording stuff from home and making quality stuff. And yeah, the end product from it is going to be remarkable.
Yeah, I'm more one of those old school guys, man. Sometimes I do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those guys where I love technology. I mean, I've got a higher end computer. I love my gadgets. But
Mhm.
sometimes when it comes to like learning something, even to this day, if I'm making dinner, I'll print the recipe off. My wife's like, "You got it right." I'm like, it's just something about glancing at that paper when I'm doing it.
Yeah,
Just it makes it. I don't know if it's just because how I grew up learning. It just seems to flow better for me, and obviously
sure.
what flows better for the younger generation will never flow the same way for me.
Yeah. And I was gonna say I'm even of the age that if I never had to look at an instruction manual again, it would be too soon. I would be so happy.
Yeah, trust me, there's some instruction manuals that I've looked at over life, and I'm like, this is the most pointless book
Mhm.
that probably was ever put together.
Yeah.
But there's some, man, where you open it up and it's like a plethora of information. And
Yeah.
I'm just one of those guys. Sometimes I just like to be able to grab the paper, look at it. My boss will go, "You can put the notes in your phone." I'm like, man, I'm telling you, just writing this and jotting this down real quick, it's going to make me remember to look at it. And then at the end of the day, I'll go back in and my planner and go put it all in there. But
Yeah.
it helps me, remember it because the young kids, their minds move at a mile a minute, where
Yeah.
I'm over here like, is it nap time yet? Sometimes,
Sure.
my wife calls it the dad nap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
used
good
to
if you can
always,
get it.
man, having once the kids come around, you're sitting there and you're like, oh well, there goes nap time. Especially if you come home and the kid's like, dad, 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 you're like, well, yep.
Yeah.
I mean, especially my wife works from home, so she only goes in the office one day a week. So kids are on summer vacation. I got a 6-year-old. He's going to be 7 next,
Yeah.
actually 4 or 5 more
Yeah.
days. Oops. But I'll come home and she pretty much looks at me like, yeah, it's your turn, buddy. I've been home with a crazy eye all day. And I'm like, I have like 200 employees. A lot of them can be crazy sometimes too.
Nope.
So
Doesn't matter.
yeah, no, it doesn't, man. I've really enjoyed this pocket, like just learning about your industry, man. I'm all about that. I'm all about learning and just trying to hear different perspectives.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
and like at some point I would definitely love to have you on again as like, I learn more things, and just in general, like because to me, podcasting is like one of the greatest things because it's like you're learning a lot about a lot of things and from a lot of different people and different personalities, and things that I would never learn walking down the street.
Right. Yeah. And for me, I mean, most people, you know, I'm in the weeds with a lot of stuff,
Oh yeah.
but that's something you wouldn't learn unless you did it. If you were in it, and like, fortunately, with what I've done, has just kind of led me down a lot of paths of saying yes to things that, yeah, of course I can book bands. And yeah, of course, like that eventually like teaches me how to, learn how to run live sound or learn how to, sell tickets or whatever it might be. So just saying yes to a lot of things has totally brought me down that way.
Yeah, and the one thing I can say to, anybody that listens to anything that you share, if it says, don't be afraid to try, don't be afraid to fall flat on your face, because it's going to happen more times than you succeed. But
Mhm.
when you hit that it's going to be like, it's literally going to be like the first time that you enjoyed something more than you ever have in your whole life. And you
Mhm.
will never forget that moment,
Yeah,
ever.
absolutely. When it works well, it works. And it is a good feeling for sure.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what it is, man. Like, I mean, that's just, I mean, I can especially because musicians, they just seem to, I want to say, go through the weeds a lot more than a lot of other industries.
Mhm. Well,
They
there's a lot
definitely
of
have it
trying and
tougher.
failing. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of trying and failing in general for sure. And, a great song might come out of 300 drafts before it. So you never know. or it might happen in 20 minutes. It just, it's how it is. It's the nature of it.
something that I've always wanted to ask somebody in the music industry, you know, and I've heard people talk about it before, right? So you got like the hits that people come out with, they put on the radio, YouTube, whatever.
Mhm.
What is behind, not that every song you think is going to be a hit is going to be a hit, but what's behind, so you're like, they know the certain song when you listen to a band, you're going, okay, and then they play a different song, you're like, that's nothing like anything you usually do, and it just does not fit.
Yeah.
What is that about? Just, I mean, before we wrap up, I mean, it's something I've always wanted to ask, and you'd seem to be the person to ask.
Like when a sound changes entirely, like
Yeah,
a
like,
band sound.
yeah, you'll have like, you'll just have this awesome, top song that maybe you can listen to, and then the song after it, you're going, what?
Yeah.
It's just, it's not that the band's bad, you're just, it doesn't
It
click as
just
well.
feels completely different. I think part of it is legitimately some bands, if it's album to album, then, they're just in a different mindset. And I've talked to a lot of artists that have been that way where they've said, yeah, we just wanted to try something different and we don't want to be pigeonholed as, like, let's say, okay, here's a very hypothetical. Let's say AC/DC decides to just use a drum machine one time. It'll never happen. Never would
Right.
happen, right?
Right.
But so let's say that they wanted to do it on one song and it sounds completely different, doesn't sound like AC/DC to them at all. But they said, we just got sick of doing the same thing over and over, that we didn't want to
Okay.
have that same sound forever. Now, of course, that wouldn't happen, but a lot of newer bands, that's what happens is they don't want to sound like 10 other bands that have come out in that same year that sound that way. So they try something and then they get fixated on it and it makes it different. Sometimes the labels will be behind that and like it, and sometimes they will be like, we don't know what to do with this. So, I'm sure that there's a lot of outtakes and a lot of songs that'll never see the light of day from some of your favorite artists that are
Yeah.
completely experimental, that they just went, yeah, nothing good came from this. But you'll never know that because the average fan will never get to hear it. But
Yeah. Unless they come out with one
most
of those
most
crazy
often than
CDs.
not, it is just a necessity to try something different and to feel that spark again of saying, hey, I've got something here, or can I do this?
Yeah. You know that, because that just, Tom McDonald just came out with an album called Proud to Be a Problem.
Hmm.
Definitely way more of like a countryish vibe.
Yeah.
And when, if you've listened to Tom McDonald, you're like, okay, I mean, it's good music. I actually enjoy it, but it's just, it took a second for me to be like,
Doesn't
okay,
feel like the other stuff. Right.
yeah, it's just
Some of
not as
that,
intense.
I mean, some of that too is the marketplace. Like, if country music is big right now, think about somebody like a Post Malone that started off rapping but is now doing country songs. There's a lot of money to be made in country music,
Yeah, there
so
is.
maybe someone's in his ear or he's watching these festivals and watching huge crowds and saying, hey, I want a piece of that. Or, he could just genuinely be like, okay, I want to branch out and try something different. Like it affects everybody differently. More often than not, I would like to naively believe that it is not money dictated, that it is just dictated by like trying to do something different. But it all does for sure play
Boiled
a
down to money.
factor.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you said Post Malone. God, I don't remember what thing I was watching, but he had went up and talked to a special needs kid, and it was a kid at attending his concert, and he like his whole body language changed. He was just like this like normal person connecting with this kid, and I was like, it just made me look at him in a whole different light, because you could just tell he actually seemed to thoroughly enjoy his interaction. And I'm like, okay, Post Malone's actually, not a bad guy.
Yeah, and I'm not the biggest fan of him, of his music, but I can't hate on somebody being genuine, and somebody wanting the best for somebody. And I see a lot of that from him and from a lot of artists, like it just sometimes you never know where people come from and where their background is. And, maybe that touched a nerve for him. So,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, some of his music's okay. It's, I wouldn't say definitely not my per se cup of tea, but I
right,
don't wake up and slap on Post Malone. But
right,
if it comes on, I definitely have no issue listening to it.
right,
But it's not
for
something
sure.
that I seek out.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
man, it's been great having you on, Alan. I definitely enjoyed this.
yeah.
It,
Thanks
it
for
was,
having me. It's been great. It's been
it,
awesome.
it's been a great experience. Tune in every now and then, man. I cover things on like a wider range of, because I just think it's an important thing that the world needs to see a little bit more of.
For
everything
sure.
in collaboration rather than everybody saying how much they hate each other.
Yeah. For
There's
sure.
way too much of that. And I get hate sells, but I think collaboration can sell just as much put in the right venue, in the
Yeah.
right situation.
Totally.
So like I said, I'm going to definitely put you on my dock to, message you down the road and we can definitely get this going again. Because there's a lot of things that come up, especially you doing the festivals all the time, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you'll have different experiences and, heck, even just like music reviews.
Yeah, I got stories for days on music festivals, but that can be yeah, it's a whole different animal. Oh man,
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine you've had some wild times with those things, man.
for sure.
I went to an Oktoberfest once that had a lot of music, and yeah, that's an event that I'll try to always try to remember the parts that I can. Yeah,
That's a
no,
good way to put it. That's a pretty good way to put it. Yeah, try to
you,
remember what you can of it.
one festival that I actually did go to that sticks out is Orion Fest.
Okay.
Metallica had rented out the whole. It's an island that's on the Detroit River. They rented out the whole freaking island,
Yeah.
and it was just wild. They had Red Hot Chili Peppers, Dropkick Murphys, tons of bands.
Yeah.
It was just an awesome time, and that was my first time ever really going to a festival,
Okay.
and it was
Yeah.
like a whole different experience.
It's a completely different level of just everything just turned up to the extreme for sure.
I can imagine your job definitely gets hectic around that when you're getting ready to put that stuff together.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's a lot of running from one place to another, trying to cover as much as you can in 3 to 4 days, and yeah, there can be a lot.
Yeah. So again, Alan, appreciate you coming on the middle ground, Mike, man. And this literally, when you said the middle ground earlier, every single podcast I've done,
Mhm.
either me or the guest says the middle ground. It is literally
Well,
like it just plugs itself in automatically.
yeah,
That's just kind of cool. But
perfect advertising for it. Then there you go.
so yeah, man. Again, I appreciate you, being on. I'll send you some links and stuff once I get through editing everything. I got about 2 more episodes that I'm still editing because I've kind of crammed a lot in a short period of time just based on my work schedule,
Sure.
to release it, and in Podmatch, man. I think Podmatch is one of the greatest things to happen to this industry.
Well, yeah, I we use it all the time for ours too. For Hustling Sideways, the podcast that I do. Yeah, we're on there now that they've got an app, or it's on my phone. Like I'm on there pretty much every day now, trying to either get booked on something or booking something else.
Yeah, right now gosh, I don't know. I've got 9 people booked,
Mhm.
and then I've got 12 more that I haven't figured out a time with yet.
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean, it's a
last
good
month.
way to get it done, get a lot done in a little bit of time. Me and my co-host, we're super busy all the time. So we
Oh,
find
yeah,
a month where we can hammer out, 4 or 5, and that handles a couple weeks of content for us. And it's great. So,
yeah. I don't work for Podmatch or anything, but all I can say is shout out to them because they put a platform together that makes sense. It's
yeah.
direct. It's not
Yeah.
overcomplicated. And I think it does a really good job matching people.
Yeah, for sure. That's how we ended up here. So it was great. All right. Sounds great. Thanks so much.